Well, most people fail at journaling or daily review for a very simple reason. They try to make it another task. They add it to the list, they set a reminder, they buy the notebook, they install the app, and for a few days it works. But then life gets busy. Things happen. The morning goes sideways, a child needs something, a meeting starts early, you sleep poorly. The system that felt inspiring on a Monday all of a sudden becomes one more thing to feel guilty about by Friday. Now, that's not because reflection is a bad idea. It's because reflection was never integrated into the rhythms of life. My name's Camden Busey, and this is a Squared Away Life podcast. And I'm looking forward to talking about how to make a daily review practice sustainable. Not by making it more impressive, not by making it more complicated, but by connecting it to the life that you are already living. Because really the goal here is not to perform a perfect ritual. You're never going to execute flawlessly every single time. And that's honestly not where the real value is. If you do it excellently once, but never again, you're not going to get these compounding effects. The goal is really to get your average, your basic daily normal practice to a good place. The goal is really to build a rhythm that helps you live with more clarity, more preparedness, and ultimately with more peace of mind. So there's a common mistake that people make when they try to build a reflective practice like this, like my daily review practice. They imagine the ideal first. They picture what this ideal situation is going to look like. There's a quiet room. You might have a beautiful notebook. You might have the perfect cup of coffee. You might have a long stretch of uninterrupted time, and even your mind is already in a great place to engage in this. It's already calm enough to think clearly. Now that sounds wonderful, and kudos to you if you have that. Take advantage of it. Enjoy it while it lasts. But for most people, that's not daily life. You might have it once in a while, but it's not daily life. Daily life is really uneven. It has interruptions. It has ordinary pressures. It has deadlines. It has fatigue and family responsibilities. There are emails, there are errands, there's unexpected problems. So if your daily review depends on ideal conditions, it's not going to survive for long. You are not going to be able to maintain it. And this is why the practice has to be built differently, right? A daily review should not be an isolated event that competes with the rest of your life, but it really needs to become part of the structure of your life, part of the rhythms of your normal everyday life. It should attach itself there to somewhere or to a rhythm or a place that already exists. So that might be your morning coffee. It might be the first moment that you sit down at your desk. It might be the few minutes after Bible reading and prayer. It might be the end of the workday. It might be a short evening reset after the house gets quiet, or the moments before you go to bed. The exact rhythm is not the point. You need to find out what works for you. But the point is that reflection, daily review, having an examined life becomes less dependent on motivation because it's connected to something stable, something you're already doing. Now, if you want your daily review practice to last, you need to give it an anchor. And an anchor is something that you already do that can carry the new habit along with it. You already wake up. You probably already make coffee. A lot of people do. You already open your laptop at some point in the day, or you sit down at your desk, fire the computer up. You already sit in a certain chair. You already start work in some recognizable way. You already end the day in some recognizable way. I imagine you have rhythms in your life. Everyone does. But the question is, where does your reflection, where does a daily review belong? Where will it fit most naturally? Now, for me, the daily review fits best in the morning. And I often connect it with Bible reading, with prayer, and with biblical meditation. And those are already morning practices for me. So the daily review is not floating out in space just as this other thing I need to do, some other disconnected, independent obligation. But it belongs to the broader morning rhythm for me. Now, that may not be your rhythm. That's fine. You might connect it to your first cup of coffee, or you might try to link this habit with opening your email or opening yesterday's note, doing some writing in the morning. You might connect it to the beginning of work, whatever. But before you start responding to other people's priorities, you look back at your own notes and you ask, what was I learning? What was I trying to do? What still matters? What was I up to? How do I want to focus on the day? Or you might connect it to the end of the day, or you could do two of them. But before you shut the laptop down, you capture the day's key events. You reflect on the decisions, the observations, the unfinished loops. You look back at previous notes and you contextualize yourself. Either way, it's valuable to you. And I would hope that you try to do this at least once per day. But what matters isn't so much what you link it to, not even so much the time of day. But what matters is that the practice has a place to live, that it's anchored to something, a rhythm of your life. Because a habit that doesn't have an anchor, doesn't have a place to live, mentally or physically, just becomes a wish, and it's not going to get done. So the daily review is not just a memory exercise. It's not just an act of nostalgia. It's not just reading old journal entries, but really it's a way of bringing your past, your future into the present, into conversation. And when I review notes from 1 week ago, I get some general perspective, some short-term calibration. I can ask myself, what was I working on? What did I feel was urgent last week? Does it still matter today? Did I follow through on these things I said I was going to do? Did I make a decision that now needs some attention? Now, when I zoom out a little bit more and gain some larger perspective by reviewing notes that are a month ago, I get some medium-term, greater perspective. I start to notice some patterns that are becoming visible, some projects that keep returning. I start to learn about what I said in the past and what I thought was important and whether or not I've been keeping up with my obligations. And then when I review notes from 1 year ago and from every year before that, I get some long-term context. How have I changed? What themes keep showing up? Usually that's what it is. It's, wow, I haven't changed much at all. I'm still dealing with the same things I've been dealing with for 4 or 5 years. But that's important for me to see. It's important for me to recognize, and this is what I get from looking at the long-term perspective, something I would not be receiving if I did not write it down in the first place, and then if I did not review it regularly. And this is where the compounding effects begin. The value is not only in the note itself, really. The value is in the repeated contact between your present situation and your present judgment, your present way of thinking, and your past experience. And the better you are at recording your experience and recording your thoughts and your feelings and the goings on of your life, the more value you're going to get, the bigger the returns you're going to find down the road. So every review creates another layer of meaning, because then you can even journal about your reflection on your previous notes. You start to see it's a compounding effect, like compound interest. So a thought from a year ago is going to enter a new context. A decision from a month ago becomes clearer. A worry, something you're worrying about from last week, you start to see that in greater proportion. And this is how I think, it's at least in my life, how I found that reflection often produces peace of mind. You're no longer trapped in the urgency of the present moment. You're standing inside of a larger story. And here's another important point. Your daily review has to be small enough to survive a real day, right? If your system requires 45 minutes of deep reflection every morning, then unless you're unemployed, and even if you're unemployed, you're probably not going to get it done. You may have designed something beautiful. You may have designed something amazing, but it's really fragile and unrealistic. There may be days when you can spend that time and you can do that much. Great, use them when you have them. But the baseline version needs to be much simpler and much more realistic. On a busy day, the daily review might be 5 minutes long. Open a note, open all your notes from a week ago, a month ago, and every year ago. Read those horizons and then capture something about them. Write down what's going on in your life at the moment. That's enough to keep the chain alive and to at least put some more principle, some more capital into your investment so that you're going to be gaining some more compound returns down the road. You don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be thorough. You don't have to extract every single possible insight every day. You do not have to turn every memory you've ever recorded into an essay. These are going to come back too. This isn't going to be the only time you ever see this note if you do it every week, every day. I mean, down the road, these notes, even if you don't spend a lot of time on them today, that same note's going to pop up, next year or whatever, next month. You're going to be able to see it later. You don't have to clean up every note. You don't have to tag every idea. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to spend some time on it and really think about it. And it might be 5 minutes, but even those 5 minutes will be excellent. So if you put too much pressure on yourself, it's going to kill your practice. It'll snuff it out. The point is that you let it breathe, you breathe some air into it, and that you have some faithful contact. And then you return to the system, you touch the notes, you let the past speak into the present, and then you add something for today, from today, so that in your next review, you have more grist for the mill, you have more capital to build upon. Some days are going to be very rich. Some days may be quite thin and may feel dry, but even those days matter because they preserve the rhythm and they pay it forward. The compounding mind is built through consistency, not necessarily through intensity, and certainly not through perfection. Okay, so a sustainable review practice also assumes some interruption. That means you should decide in advance what counts as success, even on a really messy and problematic day. If you only define success as the full version, then almost every real day becomes a failure. Instead, you need to create some levels, or at least have kind of, express mode. So level 1, capture one dated note. Sometimes I've done notes where sometimes I miss, right? I don't have anything for a day. Those are rare. But other days I know if I was really busy or away from the computer or away from whatever, just slammed, I have like one sentence or two sentences. And basically, usually they say something like, I'm really slammed today. I'm really busy with X event, or I've got some really crazy deadlines and I don't have time for a review. That's a valuable note. It might not seem like it in the time, but a year later, 2 years later, I'll remember, oh, wow, I had a lot going on. And then you can start thinking about what else was going on in my life. And that itself might be rather telling and lead to some further insight. So that's a level 1 practice. That's, for me, baseline. Level 2, read your review notes, try to write a short response. Level 3 might be doing the full review, where you're connecting ideas, you're adding links among your notes, especially if you're using a PKM system in something like Obsidian. If you're doing multi-scale time block planning, you can review and refine your plans. You can turn your insight into actions. You can set your goals and strategy and tactics, all that fun stuff. That's a higher level. That's a more optimal practice for me when I'm operating on full capacity. But all 3 levels count. You're going to get value from all of them. Now, this matters here because life is not uniform. Not every day is going to be the same, and not every day is going to afford the highest level of practice. But if your practice can't flex, it's eventually going to break. It's going to be rigid and it's going to break. If you miss a day, it's not the end of the world. You've not destroyed the system. You simply pick back up and resume the next day. The point's not to maintain a perfect streak. If you can, great, but that's not the point. The point is to make your average, raise the level of your average. Tim Ferriss was saying years ago, and then Chris Williamson, I think, picked this up. The idea here, I'm paraphrasing, but the idea isn't to be perfect all the time or to create some sort of perfect practice. The idea is to make sure that the random normal Tuesday is a good practice, higher level. So you want to get in the habit of trying to just crush a Tuesday. Just make your normal, plain, bland, average Tuesday practice way better than average. And if that becomes your average, you're going to be great. The point's not to be perfect. The point's to build a trustworthy habit, a trustworthy relationship with your own records of thoughts and your own life, and just raise the level of your normal. And then it's not going to be hard. It's just going to be normal. But then you're going to receive all sorts of wonderful benefits and returns down the line. All right. So, of course, review depends on capture. You can't review what you've never recorded. So the rhythm of daily review needs to be paired with a rhythm of daily capture. That does not need to be complicated. I usually have one block of time in the morning where I write out a more lengthy journal entry by hand in a really nice journal. Why don't I show it to you? I've got this basic Pilot Metropolitan fountain pen. And I write my daily journal in the writer. This is from Nanami Paper, NANAMIPAPER.com. It's an A5 journal, and it's got just the most amazing Tomoe River paper in it. These are 7mm lines. And, I just write a fountain pen, these entries. The last year plus, I usually typically do one entry per page, and I date it. I time it as well. I put the time that I wrote. And then I take the time to dictate that or transcribe it into my Obsidian with the timestamp so that I can review it in an automated way. So I do that pretty much every morning. That's one block. But then I try to record throughout the day. I'll often use the Drafts app on my Mac to record notes throughout the day. I get stuff into my Obsidian through some automated scripts, but I also have this Leuchtturm notebook. I have lots of notebooks, but I just record little bits and pieces throughout the day. This is usually open on my desk, and I take it to meetings, and then certain entries I'll transcribe or dictate them into my Obsidian, because I like to have everything digitized, because then it gets backed up, but also it's searchable and it falls within my typical review practice. Whatever. The point here is that you need to capture things, whether on paper or whether digitally, or you're doing voice notes and then transcribing those and then getting those into a system. You need to capture, because if you don't capture, you don't have anything to review. So work on that. Maybe at the end of the workday, write a quick recap. What did you do today? What decisions did you make? What are the loose ends? What should tomorrow's version of yourself know? How are you going to set yourself up for the next day? Capture some of these details as well. Capture what you're feeling. Capture what happened in your family. What made you laugh? Was there anything unusual that you experienced? During the day, then also try to capture your thoughts quickly. For me, I use voice dictation all the time, but I also write notes. I just get in that habit of writing, even just things in passing. It's just become compulsive. I'm not dictating or writing everything, but if I'm working on something, write it down. Then I've got this record. And then it doesn't have to be polished. They don't even necessarily need to be complete sentences, but you need to be capturing something. You need to be capturing. The first job here is to preserve your thought, and then you can refine things and work on it later. This is important because your daily review is not built out of perfect writing, but it's built on you working with your true and honest self and dealing with the recollection and reflection of what's going on in your life. The observations, the decisions, the feelings, the questions, all your memories, your ideas, your commitments, all of it, the whole complex of it. Being reflective and thoughtful about all of those things is going to help you become, I believe, a better version of yourself. You're going to gain perspective, and you're going to improve if you do so in humility and with a desire to love your neighbor better and be a better servant to others. That's going to be good for you, and daily review is helpful. All right, moving on. The reason this practice works is this is not magic. This is not some sort of trick, but it works because it respects the way that life changes. You need to have a review that fits in the rhythms of your life. And we do not usually transform or improve our lives through one dramatic moment of insight. More often, we change through repeated attention and by, as I said earlier, changing our normal, just changing the default. You need to notice your patterns, then you might notice them again, then you see where the pattern is coming from, then you can connect your pattern to a goal, then we might make a small adjustment, then a month later we will see whether that adjustment helped. That is how you change. That is how judgment is formed. That is how self-knowledge grows. That's how you stop living reactively and you begin to live intentionally and productively. And a daily review gives you a practical way to do that. Rather than just floating around day to day, doing whatever comes to mind, you now have a record of where you've been and a record of the thoughts about where you would like to go and lessons learned about how to get there. You have a practical way to move. It helps you remember what the present moment is trying to make you forget, what all the busyness in life would like to crowd out. You now have space for thinking about it and remembering it. You have a place in your notes, and now through a practice of daily review that reminds you of your goals. It reveals recurring patterns. It restores your perspective. It gives you evidence that you've faced hard decisions before. You start to see your progress, and it gives you over time, I think, a form of peace of mind. Not because life is becoming any easier, but because you are no longer approaching life as if every day begins from zero or every day is its own thing. You're building something. You're building what I call knowledge equity, self-knowledge equity, really. You're accumulating wisdom, context, perspective, practical self-understanding. If you're journaling and reflecting in biblical meditation and in prayer, you're also gaining a great knowledge equity about the Lord's work in your life and in the life of his people throughout the ages. That is of immense value, even practical value. So, if you want to start, here's the simplest version. First, you need to choose one anchor. Don't choose 5, choose one. Maybe it's your morning coffee. Maybe it's the first 5 minutes at your desk. Maybe it's right after prayer. Maybe it's the end of the workday. Second, you need to create a tiny review checklist. Read the notes from 1 week ago, your notes from 1 month ago, your notes from 1 year ago, if you have them. If you'd like some queries for doing this and some techniques, I have other videos that show you how I use Obsidian with the Data View plugin that has a query built in so that every day I just open Obsidian to my home note, which has this query embedded within it, and it just shows me a report of those notes I need to read. It's easy. I just open that every day, click on the links, and read them. That's it. That's the review. Do that. Then, after you've done that, write one sentence in today's note, a new note for today about what you've just read and perhaps about what's going on in your life. And then third, you need to define a minimum version of this. What does this look like every day? On a hard day, what counts? I would suggest this as the bare minimum. One note per day with one dated sentence. Anything beyond that is gravy. But if you can do that, just one sentence per day, what's going on? That's going to benefit you. And if you capture one honest sentence, then the system stays alive and it will compound. Even that little bit of contribution. You know, it's like putting a few pennies into your retirement savings. It will still grow. It's not going to grow as much as if you spent more time or put more money into it, but it will grow. Then return the next day. And that's it. That's your habit. That's your practice. The practice will grow as your life grows. You can add better tools later. You can add Obsidian queries, templates, data view, bases, AI assistants, more sophisticated planning systems later. You could do all the scripts and everything that I've built up over the last 5 or 6 years. But you don't need to worry about that now. You don't need to start with all that complexity. Just start with a rhythm and a baseline practice. The daily review is not meant to be a burden. This is not complicated. It is not difficult, but I found it to be tremendously rewarding and beneficial to me. And I think it will be for you too if you carry up or take up this practice. It's meant to become a point of return, knowledge equity, a place where you recover perspective, a place where you remember what matters. It will be a place where yesterday, last month, last year are not lost. They're just brought forward into today with a greater wisdom. And that's why this really matters. And if the practice remains a separate task and it's not part of your rhythm of life, you're going to be vulnerable and eventually it will disappear. You'll fail to do it. But if it does become part of your life, it can compound quietly over time. And that's where the real value is. Not in the perfect notebook, not in the perfect app, not in the perfect morning routine, but in the steady act of returning, reflecting, and carrying your wisdom forward. Raise your default to a higher level. Crush a Tuesday. Start small, attach it to something real, write one dated note, then come back tomorrow. That's how the rhythm begins. Thank you. We'll see you next time. I'm Camden Busey. This has been the Squared Away Life podcast. Let's go get squared away.